So servlet container responsibilities are what here? From first onwards, it need to read HTTP data, it need to convert into HTTP servlet request, later based on address it need to create servlet object. Once after creation of object, send data, it need to send the data to your servlet. So then finally again what it need to do, once after completion of process, it will give the response data. So again that response data, the response it will convert into again HTTP protocol, finally the same protocol data it will send to your browser. So who will do this job? Your servlet container. We have an open source servlet container given by Apache. Apache given one container, servlet container. Apache given one Tomcat. It's an open source servlet container. Open sources means here freeware. You can download and you can use it. You no need to pay. Okay. So this open source servlet container you can use to run your servlet classes. But how to run? We know exactly what we have to do. Every servlet need to have an address and we need to design some HTML pages here. We need to have some HTML pages. We need to have some servlets. That servlets they need to have some addresses. And you need to have an application name here. But which format I need to follow here to prepare an application, servlet application? You need to follow some kind of directory structure here. Simply you should not create an application there, you should not put your servlets. You need to follow some folder structure here. You must need to follow that folder structure. Without following that structure if you keep, it can't able to find out your servlet classes. So which directory structure you need to follow here? Before putting application into your container, you need to use one directory structure here. So which directory structure we need to use? Servlet container will accept well directory structured application. Your application directory structure need to be applicable to your servlet container. So how that directory structure you need to prepare? Directory structure. Directories means folders only. Okay. Directory structure for servlet. Directory structure for servlets. First you need to create a application folder first. Your application folder. So here in this application folder, which name I should use for that folder? Your application name you have to use. If your application is like ICICI Bank application, then you need to keep here ICICI. If your application is My Bank, you need to keep My Bank. If your application is Durgasoft, you need to keep Durgasoft. So here application name is, it's your choice. You can keep any application name here. Okay, inside that folder, again you need to have one more folder here. Again you need to have one more folder, webinf. You need to have one more folder, webinf. You need to have one more folder, webinf. Inside that webinf, again you need to have two more folders. Again you need to have two more folders here. Classes and one more folder is lib. Okay, this folder structure you need to follow. So inside that folders what I should put? Inside application folder directly you can put here your view resources. You can put view resources here. View resources means your HTML pages, your JSP pages, images, audio files, video files, CSS files, JavaScript files, whatever the things you are using for your UI designing. For that UI designing, whatever the things you are using, you can put all the designing pages inside your application folder directly. Okay, so you can put all your view resources inside application folder. View resources are what? View resources are simple HTML pages, your CSS files, JavaScript files, JSP pages, and images, audio, videos, anything, any graphics files. You can keep anything here which is useful for your UI. For user interface, what are the HTML, CSS, JavaScript, images, audio files, video files you are using? You can keep all these files under view resources. This view resources is not a folder, okay? Directly you can keep them under application folder. Inside your application folder, you can store all these. Okay, then here I have one more folder, WebInf. Inside that folder, I have a classes folder and I have a libraries folder. Inside this classes folder, what we should put? Inside classes, your servlet classes. Servlet dot class files you need to put here. You can have number of servlets, right? You can have number of servlets. That all servlets you need to keep inside classes folder. Not only servlets, along with your servlets, you can keep any other extra Java classes also. Okay, if your application means application can have complete MVC classes, right? So you can have controller classes. Servlets are what? Simple controller classes. So if that controller class, if it requires any model, where that model classes need to put, you can put that models also here. Okay, you can keep your servlet classes and you can keep your model classes also here. You can keep your servlet classes and model related classes also you can write here. Okay, but exactly this class is given for servlet classes, but along with servlets you may require model support also here. Okay, sometimes your application it may made by Spring, so if you do by using Spring, your model classes also you need to put here, or else if you are using simple JDBC, your model classes you need to put here. But if it is EJB model classes you should not put here. In case of EJB, we require again EJB container. So that EJBs we need to remove from here and we need to keep them under EJB container. Okay, if your model class, if it is designed by using simple JDBC or else by using Spring, you can keep them here. Okay, so along with your servlets, you can keep your model classes also here. And inside libraries, what are the additional APIs you require? Extra APIs. If you are using any file upload API, then commons file upload .jar file. If you are using any other extra jar files, like while using servlets, you need to keep a servlet API jar. And if you are going through any other jar files, that all jar files we need to keep here. If you are using Spring, then Spring related jar files. For runtime, whatever the jar files we required. Whenever we required a class file from a particular jar file, what we will do? We used to keep that jar file into class path, right? But in case of servlet applications, you don't need to put your jar files into class path. Instead of putting under class path, you need to keep the jar files under library. So then what your container will do? Your container at runtime, it will keep all these jar files for class path. You don't need to worry about class path here. Just copy your jar files and keep them under libraries folder here. And write your servlet classes under classes folder. Write your HTML pages under application folder. Okay, so then finally the mapping between your browser and servlet. Here we have mapping URL, right? So this mapping URLs you need to put under one XML file. That XML file name called web.xml. Inside this web.xml file you need to put mappings. Whenever I submit this form data, the address is what? Something /a, where we need to put this address inside web.xml file. So in this web.xml file, you need to keep your mapping data. Whenever the request is for A, I want to execute a servlet. That mapping information you need to keep under web.xml file. By reading that web.xml file, your servlet container will understand for which form, which servlet need to execute. So inside web.xml file, what we should configure here? The mapping between form and servlet. The mapping between form and servlet, we need to keep them under web.xml file. So whenever I try to create my application by using this directory structure, when I put this directory directly into servlet container will do what first? If I use the directory structure and if I keep that application as it is in servlet container inside Tomcat container. Okay, under Tomcat container if I put it, if I keep this under Tomcat servlet container. If you put this application into Tomcat container, inside Tomcat container actually there is one folder, web root folder. Inside that web root folder, if you keep it, inside web root folder, if you put your application, so then what your container will do, when you start your container, when you call start on your container will do what? Container will try to read all the application's web.xml files. First your servlet container, Tomcat servlet container, if it is a Tomcat, what it will do? First it will read your web.xml file. From your application folder it will read web.xml file. In that web.xml file it will read all these mappings. In these mappings what we are configuring? Some form URL and servlet class. It will read all this data. In this data, if it find any invalid servlet here, it will shows class not found. While reading itself, it will try to search for these paths, whether this A class is there or B class is there in this classes folder or not, it will search. Okay, first it will read your web.xml file. Inside web.xml file, we are trying to mapping what? Form and servlets. So for that servlet, it will try to search under classes folder. Okay, here if it find a servlet, it will try to find out for the A servlet class inside your classes. If it find that class, okay, it is fine. If it not find, then it will shows class not found exceptions. Okay. See a simple example. While writing a letter, you need to keep two address, but your home also need to have same address, right? Postal office also need to have same address. When you try to post a letter, here I need to keep some two address. Okay, here you need to enter your two address and you need to post it. So who will receive first? Directly it will go to your home. It need to go to near postal office, right? It need to go to first your postal office. Then postal office people, what they will do, is this two address is fine or not, they will check. If it is fine, then it will send to your home, or else. Okay, so here what we are trying to do, just we are trying to mapping. When I submit a form, for that form it requires address. Without having address, how it can map to a servlet? Getting? Inside form you have address, but I have a form address here and I have many servlets here. Which servlet need to execute for that form? So when my form address compulsory you need to keep two address here. Without having two address, how we can submit? Inside form you need to have two address. Again, the two address related to which servlet, that need to configure under web.xml file. Okay, so by reading this web.xml file, it will read your servlet class. So is this servlet class is there in this classes folder or not, it will search. If it find that class, okay, it is fine, it will not do anything. It will try to read these files. If it find any file here, this class file here, it will leave it. If it not find, then while starting itself, it will shows class not found exceptions. Your servlet container will say, inside web.xml file you have configured some servlets. I try to search for that servlets here. I didn't find the servlet class. So and so class name it will show to us. Okay. So whatever the classes you are going to configuring here, that all classes must need to be there under your classes folder. Why? Because at the time of starting time, your Tomcat container, by reading web.xml file, it will try to read your servlet classes here. And what it will do? It will not do anything. Sometimes it will create your objects at the time of starting time itself. Okay, inside web.xml file there are many configurations. You can configure actually for this servlet. If you say your AI servlet is important one, we can keep some load on startup for this servlet. Let's say if you configure some load on startup 0 or 1, important, that means important. Without configuring load on startup, if you configure your servlet, then that servlet is not important. If you configure load on startup here, then you are saying to your servlet container, my servlet is important one. So then what your Tomcat container will do when you start, if it find any load on startup here, okay, it will decide to create this object at the time of starting time itself. If it not find any load on startup, then it will not create your servlet object. When it will create servlet object, actually whenever you submit data first time, whenever you submit this address first time, then it will create your servlet object. But if it find any load on startup, at the time of starting time itself, it will create your servlet object. Okay, so anyways, so it will try to read your a servlet, and if it find load and startup here, that servlet object it will create. If it not find, just it will find out whether that class is there or not. Okay, anyways, finally what you should do once after starting your container, you need to invoke your view pages. You need to open one browser. In that browser you need to enter URL. You need to enter your URL here. So if you have any page here, that page URL if you pass here, that page content it will load. Means from here to here it will load one HTTP content. So once after loading your HTTP content, if you submit your data, for every form it need to have some address, right? Form action. So if you have one form action here /a, when I submit it, along with your URL, it will append /a. Then this data again it will submit to your server in the form of HTTP protocol. It will send your data. Then for this A address, it will try to find out a servlet here. It have one servlet, right? A servlet. So then directly it will invoke your A servlet, and it will submit data to A servlet class. Finally, A servlet need to give response. That same response it will send to your browser. Okay, got it? So you must need to follow this directory structure. And here web.xml file is not mandatory. From Servlet 3 API onwards, they give an annotation support. Annotation means annotations we need to keep on top of your servlet itself. They given some web servlet annotations. On this servlet annotation itself, you can keep your URL patterns. You can keep it on top of your class itself. You don't need to use any web.xml files. Okay, but before Servlet 3, we must need to configure web.xml file here. So you can call this web.xml file as a deployment descriptor file. Okay, you can call it as deployment descriptor file. So in this web.xml file, what we need to configure for the deployment, whatever the things you require. Not only these mappings, any startup things if you required, any inputs if you want to pass to your servlet, so that inputs also you can pass from here. Okay, all the required startup things you can configure under web.xml file. Okay, there are many tags in web.xml file. Okay, yeah, later we'll discuss all those tags. This is the directory structure we need to follow, and here which classes we need to put? Only servlet classes only we have to put. Servlet classes means, is it a simple Java class? It's a plain Java class, or else we need to extend it from any other API. You need to extend your servlet classes from servlet API. Okay.